about this proposal that I'm going to make now. Let me use the whiteboard and show it to you again. And here, let me turn on some semicircles. Semicircles. There we go. All right, and the whiteboard's on again. All right, now here you will see the 54-month cycle trough that I've told you I believe happened in 2003, not just myself, but many people. And here is the 54-month cycle, the straddled trough in August of 2007. And as you can see, this whole thing over here is the software telling us that the next expected 54-month trough is expected towards the end of this year or early next year, early 2012. Now, I have included in the nominal model used to perform this analysis a 6-year cycle, which is this red cycle. I hope you can see that red semicircle there. I'm going to draw over it just so that it really confuses everybody. There's that red circle. Okay. One of the beta testers of Sentient Trader way back in 2009 suggested to me that perhaps there was a 6-year cycle that was active, and so I've built a 6-year cycle into this nominal model, and this analysis has been performed on the basis of including that 6-year cycle. And I must say that 6-year cycle seems to me to answer some of the questions that one has about what has been happening in the S&P 500 recently. And let me explain fairly quickly what the 6-year cycle helps to resolve. Okay. And I'll do that by talking about the shapes of the cycles. Let me turn off the semicircles for now. Okay, and let me go back to the analysis that does not have the 6-year cycle. Actually, sorry, I think I'm going to actually rather use this chart. There we go. That does not have. Okay, right, that's the chart I want to use to demonstrate this particular point. Okay, now let's assume there isn't a 6-year cycle, and let me show you why I think there might be a 6-year cycle. If there isn't a 6-year cycle, then we're talking about a 4-year cycle playing out like that, and then like that. Now let's have a look at the shape of the 18-month cycles. And I know you probably chuckle when I mention shape. My whole approach towards Hurst cyclic theory has a lot to do with the shapes that the cycles make. But that's because Hurst said that when the underlying trend of a cycle is up, then you would expect peaks to occur late and troughs to occur early. When the underlying trend of a cycle is down, you expect peaks to occur early and troughs to occur late. The result is that you get a particular shape of a cycle. Let me show you what I mean. Let's have a look at this first 18-month cycle, which plays out from here to here. What is the shape of the cycle in the price? Well, it has a late peak. I hope you can see that. Here is the peak, and if I draw above the price, it has a late peak. Okay, so that is the sign of a cycle that has an upward underlying trend. Let's have a look at the next 18-month cycle. Again, I'll draw above the price. There you can see that cycle shape. And again, it has a late peak, which indicates that it has an upward underlying trend. I hope everybody's following this. If let me draw below here what you would expect if it had a neutral underlying trend. You'd expect a shape to be something like that. Okay, it would go up with the peak somewhere in the middle and then down again. These cycles both have late peaks. You can see the peaks occur late in the shape. Let's have a look at the next cycle that goes from there to there. That also has a late peak, indicating that you still have an upward underlying trend. Okay, now let's have a look at the shape of the next 18-month cycle, and this one, let me draw this one below price. It rises to a peak over there and then crashes down to here. So that's an early peak, which would indicate that there is a downward pointing underlying trend. Okay, let's have a look at this 18-month cycle, and this is where my point, I hope, gets really sort of driven home, because this cycle has a late peak. You see this peak here? The peak in, where was that? In April of 2010, this peak over here. That is a late peak for the cycle. You can see the shape of it. The more I draw on this chart, the more confusing it gets, I know. But that cycle has a late peak. That indicates that the underlying trend for that cycle is in fact upward. Okay. Now, let me. So what we have is we have upward, 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 downward, and then upward. And let me clear that whiteboard and show you. If we had only a 4.5-year cycle and a 9-year cycle, then the 4.5-year cycle would be bouncing like that. Oops. And the 9-year cycle, assuming that 2003 was a trough of the 9-year cycle, which is not by any means a given, but assuming that it was, then let's have a look at the underlying trend picture that we would have. Here we would have upwards, as we did. Okay. Here we would have probably fairly sort of neutral, and here we have one cycle coming down, and this one is sort of leveling out. So it's neutral, maybe slightly negative. Here we have a neutral 9-year and a positive 4 years. So it's neutral, perhaps slightly positive. Here we have pretty much a negative underlying trend, and here we have a strongly negative underlying trend. Now, what's the problem with that? Well, this whole section over here is okay. These cycle shapes are okay for, because remember the cycle shape was positive, the cycle shape was positive, the cycle shape was positive. So all of these cycle shapes, all the way up to 2007, are all okay. You know, there's no problem with them. However, here things start going a little bit astray, because the cycle shape, the 18-month cycle shape from August of 2007 to March of 2009, is a strongly negative cycle shape. It had a very early peak. Look at that peak. That peak was right over there. Very early peak, and then it came down really strongly. So that implies a cycle that has a strongly negative underlying trend. And yet our calculation here indicated that the underlying trend, considering the 4.5-year and 9-year cycle, would be 0 or +1. Then here the underlying trend was negative, but the cycle shape was in fact strongly positive. See that? How do you know that? Because there's a late peak. Simple as that. There's the late peak. Okay? So a strongly positive shape when it should have been a negative underlying trend. And it's a little too early to say what's happening now, but this shape does not look strongly negative. I've got to say the shape that's been playing out since July of 2010 doesn't look strongly negative. If anything, it looks fairly neutral. Looks like a neutral underlying trend. So that's why I investigated further the 6-year cycle, and when performing an analysis that includes the 6-year cycle, let me show you how, and I think if I show semicircles that will help to demonstrate it, how the 6-year cycle actually resolves to some extent that problem. The 18-month cycle here has a strongly positive underlying trend because the 4-year cycle and the 6-year cycle are going up. Here again it has a positive underlying trend, or neutral, because 4 is level and 6 is going up. Okay, then here it should be slightly negative. Okay, so here there's a bit of a discrepancy because that's a positive shape. Whereas now here we have an upward 54-month cycle and a downward 6-year cycle. So this is a neutral shape. So, and here the cycle shape was, of course, strongly bearish. So, why is it bearish? Well, possibly because there is also a 9-year cycle. Okay, and that 9-year cycle has turned down over here. So in this period over here, the 9-year cycle was adding a bit of impetus to create an upward momentum, and here the 9-year cycle has turned down and is providing us with a negative cycle shape. Okay, then over here the 6-year cycle has turned up. So that goes +1 here. The 4-year cycle is pretty much neutral, and so we have a neutral or positive underlying trend. And then for this area over here, we have the 6-year cycle still going up, and we have the 4-year cycle going down, and the 9-year cycle is most probably going down. So we have something which is possibly neutral, or neutral or slightly negative. I hope that shows you why I think there is a good chance that there is a 6-year cycle that is currently active in the market. Let's move forward and discuss what's been happening recently and the 3 possible alternate analyses I have. I see a question from John. You can also note how the SPX has yet to meet the 1050 target generated by the 18-month FLD this summer. Okay. Yes. Okay, so let's zoom in here. Okay. So John is saying 18-month FLD. Let's have a look at the 18-month FLD.